Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Starting a Counseling Practice podcast. This is Miranda from Zinni-Me, and I'm really excited to have Annie here from the Rebel Therapist that's going to be talking about the rebellion of what happens when, if you decide to close your practice and do something different. It's going to be a lovely, juicy, real conversation because that's the only way that Annie and I do it when we're together, I feel like. So yeah, here we are. So Annie, do you want to share your web address and your name? And I just butcher your last name every single time. So that's why I'm not saying it. I don't.
No, Schuessler.
Schuessler. See,
So,
like as soon as I think about it, my tongue like gets large and it like flips through.
So Annie Schuessler, and my web home is rebeltherapist.me. And I go by she or they. And did I answer everything you just asked me? I'm just so excited.
That was it. We're keeping it kind of simple because I don't think you could say where you're from because, people might be interested as to like where you happen to reside at the moment. But I know your practice, you do work that's online. So it's
exactly. Yeah. And I'm in the Bay Area right now of California. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. So we're going to start a little bit at the beginning, and then we're going to fast forward and then like get to the juicy middle and end ish kind of thing. So in like 1 minute or less, why'd you decide to become a therapist?
I feel like I struggled so much with depression as a kid and with anxiety that I was lucky enough to be in therapy from the time I was about 8. Mm-hmm. And like, I got kind of identified as like, what's wrong with this one? And luckily got some therapy, and which is kind of rare because I'm like almost 50. So it's a little bit rare to get that like in the 70s. And
hippie parents or
hippie parents.
That makes it less rare.
Yeah. Like some white privilege, like, a combination of things. And like, I went to a liberal school. So yeah. So I had a lot of therapy. And in the course of that, I really got interested in the other side of it. Like I got really curious about how therapy works, how maybe I could be a therapist myself. And so that was just there from probably the time I was a teenager that I was curious about therapy. And I always loved to analyze things. I always loved those deep conversations. Mm-hmm. And it looked like that was the spot where you could have those deep conversations and no small talk. And I was like, yes, I want that.
Done. Were you a dork like me? Did they like peer counselor in high school? Like I was that level of like down the path, or was that not a thing when you were?
I did that in college. Yeah. So I started down that path in college. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Perfect. And then how long did it take you to get through the like schooling and licensure part of things?
Well, I took a little side path because I didn't feel like I could be a therapist until I had some more life experience. So I took a side path and I co-owned a restaurant for a few years and did some different really cool stuff. Mm-hmm. And then I became a therapist when I was in my late 20s. Okay. And then I went into private practice. I was working in agencies and I also went into private practice. And so I was a therapist for 20 years. Mm. Yeah.
Yeah. And just from the piece, how many years in agency? And then how long did it take to burn you out in age? I mean, to shift over into private practice?
Right. You're right. So I worked at an agency that no longer exists. It was like a queer agency in San Francisco for about, I want to say like 5 to 8 years, somewhere in that range. I started as an intern, and then I like moved through that process and was a team manager in the end of it. Mm-hmm. And I was building my private practice at the same time. So I
Mm.
started my private practice as an intern, and I really had a private practice the whole time, but it
You
started
knew.
out tiny and
Yeah.
unprofitable, and then it grew dramatically over those years.
Awesome. Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll kind of skip over when, as you were in private practice, when and why did you start to look at rebel therapists? Like, where did that brainchild start to birth itself?
Yeah, I started noticing really early on that even though I had wanted to be a therapist my whole life, that it wasn't necessarily going to be the right fit
Mm.
long term. And I was so ashamed of that. So the seed of that really showed up very early. I remember talking to a supervisor who I still know and adore to this day. I remember her saying that she would never want to do anything else. She was so satisfied by this work and just so completely fulfilled by it that her only concern was like that she wanted to make sure she could do it forever. And I felt like that's how I should feel.
Oh,
And I was only just like a couple years in at that point, if that. And I was like, oh no, I don't think I feel this way. And I better, just go to more trainings, and maybe I just need to get to be a better therapist. And then I'm going to feel that way too.
mm,
Did, you know, as we all do, like did all the trainings in the world,
yeah.
got a lot of years under my belt, like did some really good work. And still, I didn't feel like that supervisor. I felt like there was this other part of me, this other set of
Mhm.
skills that I wanted to use, these other parts of my personality I wanted to use.
Mm,
And I just kind of kept trying to figure out a way to make being a therapist the right fit for me.
mm,
And business coaching started showing up around the edges where I was learning how to make my own profitable business fly and be joyful. And that's, as you know, like that's a lot to learn. And I
yeah.
found that I loved that learning and I loved sharing it with other people. And so around the edges, I was informally coaching other therapists in private practice on their businesses and loving that work.
Mm,
And so it took a long time for me to really give myself permission to
yeah.
step all the way into that work and say, this is actually what I want to do.
Yeah.
And so then I started building that. It's going to be about 12 years ago now. I started
Yeah.
building that, and then it took me longer, and I think too long really, to step all the way into that and say, this is what I want to do. This is
To give
really what I want
yourself
to do.
permission.
Yes.
It's so interesting because I feel like there's so much about our paths that are that are very similar, but
Mhm.
also like very different. I started doing coaching. I kind of fell into it just because I had this online community for study for exams. And so
Mm.
people, when I started my private practice during the recession, were like, what are you doing? How are you doing this? Can you help? And I was like, sure, I'll show you what I did. I'll help you build the website. I'll show you how to show up on Google. Like oh wait, now you're showing up on Google, but like you don't know how to have the conversation. Oh, let me teach you how to like have the conversation, all the things. But as it was growing and expanding, I was having this like I actually started like basically in prayer, meditation, whatever you want to call it. I was having this thing that just kept saying, let go, let go,
Mm.
let go. And I actually called Kelly at the time and I was like, hey, look, I know we have this like whole business together, but like I feel like I'm being told to let go. And I can't imagine that any like higher power universal truth would tell me to let go of therapy. That
Mm.
couldn't possibly be it
Yeah.
because therapy is like the thing. This is
Yeah.
the thing that changes lives. This has such a direct impact. And I was still discounting in some ways the like real emotional and psychological and empowerment based and therapeutic impact of business coaching. Like it's pretty magical, like what we
Yes.
do. Like it is like, it ticks all the boxes. But I was like convinced in that moment that like, and she was like, well, like, are you being directed to like let go of me? And I was like, well, I don't know. Like, I don't feel like, I keep asking the question and I don't get that answer, but my head says, I can't imagine that I would let go of therapy.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Like it's
maybe
that
it's like,
struggle.
I wonder if it's like a weird trick because for both of us, it wasn't letting go of therapy altogether. Like we have these profound and meaningful
Yeah.
relationships with therapy and
Yeah.
with therapists. So
Yes.
it's like a little tricky to figure out.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes I think of what I do and what we do and our coaches do in our program as business therapy. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and it's been funny over the years. Like I remember someone saying like, this is a therapist empowerment program disguised as a business building course or something like all of
Yeah.
these things that say like, oh, wow. Like when we make a change in one area of our life, it impacts all the other areas, right? Like that's what they teach us when we were going to therapy school, right? Going to the
Yeah.
therapy school is like, hey, when somebody makes a change in an area, it can go in and it can start to change the way they react in other similar situations. So when a therapist learns how to, change their anxiety about money in their business, then it changes their anxiety about money in their personal finances. And when they learn to say no to someone who's asking something of them that crosses their boundaries in business, it gets a little easier at home. And, it's an interesting thing to watch. And
Absolutely.
it's just
Yeah.
kind of magic.
Yeah. And I think for me, it's a really good fit that I get to help people walk through a very concrete process
Mm-hmm.
in order to do some really deep transformational work. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's where I happen to get to help people with things like visibility
Yeah.
and often like embracing parts of their identity, all kinds of deep things.
Yeah.
And the way I happen to help them do it is by creating programs. Like
Yeah.
that's the vehicle for the
Yeah.
work. And I love that magical thing of helping someone do something concrete, but then allowing that to unearth so much other stuff.
I think it brings it all up to the surface,
Yeah.
right? Like
So fast.
something simple, like, hey, let's get your picture on your website.
Yeah.
Like I remember when I really thought that was a simple thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't realize like all of the pieces as part of my privilege, right? Definitely I have, and I'm saying that as someone who has a lot of anxiety about photographs and a lot of anxiety about that, but I still like fully minimize what does that look like when you're queer? What does that look like when you're non-binary? What does that look like when you've been taught to whitewash your house and everything about your life and your business because people are going to judge you and like, go into your house and say it's worth $100,000 less because there's a picture of a Black family on the wall. Like I had no context for any of that, when I started this 15 years ago. And to see like, to let my clients really like inform me and to look and explore, well, what is the thing? Like, what is the thing that I'm missing? Oh shit, I'm missing a lot. And now that I understand it, now the conversation looks really different about how to break through that and how to start to really kind of break through some of that like systemic oppression that's happened over a long period of time and how to create real safety for people and to explore what does this mean? Like, what does this look like emotionally? And let's prepare you for, what does that look like? How does that maybe having a picture will protect you from microaggressions, but also might make you a target of over aggression. So like, how do we prepare you for both scenarios, whatever your decision is?
So it's so much bigger.
Yeah.
It's also like I have to remind myself with what can feel like a small step to me, like sending out a weekly email, like for, when someone is taking their business in a new direction and going into more of the global online space. Like, and part of that might be writing a weekly email to your list. And that now for me is not a big deal. Like in my own personal business, that's not a big deal anymore, but it used to be. And now other things are a really big deal to me. And so I have to slow down for a second and do what you just did and like remind myself, okay, this is a big step the first time that you do it, or like the fifth time that you do it. And there's an emotional process and a spiritual process to it.
Yeah.
And I love how you just slowed that down around the photo.
Yeah. And I think that even again, going back to that place, like the amount of times that I've been able to like having a conversation with a coaching client and say like, what's it been like when you've spoken up before? You find the history and you're like, okay, cool. So you're going to do that in therapy, but in this moment, right? Like we can at least identify like, hey, do you notice like where you're feeling that in your body? Is this old stuff? Oh, it is. Okay. So let's honor that this is old stuff. And let's like, what do you need to be able to move through this? Like, does it need to be something that we just do something different? Do you need some more time? Do we need some brain spotting? Do we need some therapy? Do we need some journaling? Like, let's get to know your body and listen to what your body's telling you that it needs some attention, right? Instead of just railroading over it. But I think the other piece going back to that, right? So we're talking about this idea of like being in the struggle of like being pulled in a direction or pushed in a direction and feeling like, well, no, I can't or shouldn't give this other thing up. What was the turning point, breaking point, shifting point? What was like the moment for you where you're like, it's time?
Yeah, like it's time to actually close the practice.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So by the time I closed my practice, I had my practice to a point where I really loved it. And so that sounds weird, probably not to you, but that might sound weird to some folks. Like, well, why would you then close it if you loved it? But what getting to the point where I loved it for me was really giving myself permission a bunch of times to make changes in my practice, like to set the hours I wanted, to really work with the folks who I was best suited to work with, and to give myself permission to be really out as queer on my website and everywhere, all kinds of stuff like that, that liberated me and made my work better. And it was down to one morning a week. So it would be Tuesday mornings every week. I would go into the office before COVID, and I loved it. And I loved and still love the folks who I was working with. And still, I hit this point where I realized it was very much like, I know you talk about Marie Kondo.
Yeah.
Freaking genius. It was really a moment of a Marie Kondo thing of realizing, okay, but what would I do now to create this therapy practice? If I didn't have it, what would I do to get a license? What would I do to like grow a practice? And I realized that this wasn't something I wanted to take into the future with me, that this was something I wanted to like honor and thank and release, because I really love having a simple life and running one business. And so it was like, okay, even though this is freaking great and meaningful, like there's an opportunity to cost to everything. You don't get to do everything in this one precious life.
Yes. This whole idea of the amount of people that think the idea of multiple streams of income means that you should have multiple businesses.
Oh God,
and
no.
like
Please no.
like, or that like they need a passive income stream, right? That's never passive.
No.
And they're like at the point that you have two different audiences and two different websites, like I've had the points in my life and my business where I had three different Facebook pages, three different email systems, three different versions of MailChimp at that point back in the day, three different Twitters, like all of those pieces. Like it is more mental energy than people really realize to be balancing those pieces. And that's having two separate businesses is different than having one business where you happen to have like two services you provide. And
Yes.
even that sometimes can be a little complex, like depending on what the services
Absolutely.
are. But I think there's something to that place of like getting down to the core of
Mhm.
quality of life and joy, and to be able to say like, oh, I really only need one profit and loss. I only need to have like one LLC or one S corp filing or what have you. Like, depending on how disparate your businesses are, it really does. um I think it's like having kids. I'm saying this as someone who has one child, by the way, that like I never think of kids as like that you're just like adding one on. I think of them as exponential until you get to
Mm.
five, right? And then you're okay until you get to the point that you need like more than eight. So like you have to get the big van that you need the thing. Like at that point, they kind of like take care of them each other or whatever. But yeah, three kids is not like having one kids.
Hmm.
Like it's a whole different like experience.
Yeah. And I also felt like, okay, so what I could do with Rebel Therapist as is, this when I had my practice, I can make it really wonderful. And what more can I do with it if I take all of this energy and I
Yeah.
put it all, not all my energy, but all of my business energy
Yes.
into Rebel Therapist? It just can do even more. And
Yeah.
so I'm one person,
Yeah.
and I realized, yeah, I can make a bigger impact if I have one business. And
Yeah.
I can also, like, right before we hit record, we were talking about joy and like some of the things we like to do for joy. Like, I can play my ukulele, for example.
Yes. The
So, yeah.
it's funny, when I closed my practice, it came in like a very different way.
Mm,
And actually it came with, I don't even know that I've ever like fully publicly talked about it, but it was a very like, I felt really scared and I felt really like ashamed. Like there was a
yeah.
certain amount of like shame regarding it. And it was, and then one side, it was so easy for me because I literally kind of got, again, I'm one of those like spiritually directed people. I kind of got this download of like, okay, you're supposed to like move to Seattle for,
Mm,
this is at that now my former husband, also something I tend to keep on the download, right? My ex-husband, for his job.
hmm.
And it was like, are you sure? And that of course was then when suddenly this let go thing that I kept hearing like made so much more sense. Like, and it was just clear as day, like crazy story for another time. That like we were supposed to move to Seattle for his job.
Mm.
And I'm not licensed in Seattle.
Oh, yeah.
And I
Hmm.
don't want to do trauma work in online.
Yeah.
And you know what? I don't know how long we're going to be in Seattle. And I don't want to grow a trauma practice in a state that I'm not committed to. And I don't want to bring people in to do like what's like medium to long-term work only to like leave in a year or three. Like, I don't know what this life is going to look like. And so I really just leaned into, and I kind of like, people are like, oh, you moved to Seattle. And I was like, no, like I went kicking and screaming, knowing that this is like what I was supposed to do, but like
Mm.
had no desire to go to Seattle, like no desire for the Pacific Northwest, even though it's beautiful. It's lovely. I miss the
Yeah.
views, but like that was not my dream location. Um, and closed down my practice, my very successful, profitable, happy, joyful, loved everything about it practice.
Hmm.
And was kind of like pushed into, all right, well, ethically, morally, everything about you feels like opening a practice in Seattle doesn't make sense. You already have this other thing happening within me. And so now
Yeah.
it's like going all in. And our income was always like, I was usually the primary income earner. So
Hmm.
then we moved to Seattle and it was a very expensive place to live. So I had to like figure it out really quickly to replace my income from the other
Yeah.
place in a way that made sense but that going all in and having like full focus, I mean, it was really the point that Zenny Me went from something that kind of was interesting and helped a few people to really starting to make a dent in the world,
Mhm.
you know?
It's like betting on yourself, going
Oh,
all in on yourself.
yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. As opposed to like, I was definitely like, I know a lot of people have relationships where their partners are people that are very, like they're dependent on their partners financially. And for most of our marriage, like it was the opposite way. My husband really struggled to like get and keep a job at the time. And this was actually, it was really great for him. It was like a really turning point in his career. And he's been very successful from there. But it was definitely like, okay, I'm going to this place with someone who really struggles to like keep a job. So like I need to like figure this out.
Yes.
But it was so interesting how just trusting that intuition place, trusting that messaging place, whatever you want to call it. And I was not comfortable with any of it, but I
Hmm.
knew that it was the right thing in the right time. And
Yeah.
I think there's so many ways when we're talking about like making business decisions. A lot of my like business decisions, even opening up my private practice initially, was based on that, like, oh, it's time to do that. Oh, you're supposed to quit your job. Wait, I haven't planned for that. Like, what's going on? Okay, I'm gonna do the thing, but I'm terrified. And I'm just gonna like figure it out as I go. And you know, we definitely in our coaching, we try to teach people the other way to like be planful and to like, you know, tick all the T's and dot all the things. But like at the same time, there's this core place where sometimes it's just time.
That's
And like
right.
you just know it with your whole being. And I think it can be um it can be really powerful on whichever side of the fence you're on when you know that a change needs to be made. To
Yeah.
know that like sometimes you cross every T and dot every I, and sometimes you just go for it, you
Yeah.
know?
Absolutely. And like I feel like there's a rhythm to that that's different for each of us. Like I'm very risk tolerant. Like I
Mm,
tend to do some behind the scenes research and like feel into things. And I have kind of a process to check in with myself every
mhm.
morning. And I also, I know some people just need to go a little bit slower. And so as a coach, like I, it sounds like you do this too. Like I really try to tune into what different people's paces are
Yeah.
around this stuff and to like give people a lot of room to do more I dotting and T crossing than I need to do. Like I always tell people like if they're like, "Well, how did you do it?" I'm like, "Well, this is how I did it." And like you may need to talk to more lawyers and like, more take more time with this. You may need a bigger on-ramp than I
Yeah.
needed and like but yeah, I also love hearing about how you've been the breadwinner and that's been my story too.
Mm,
And I think that's really, you know, it does make it different. It does make
yeah.
it different to take that leap of faith knowing that you're kind of carrying your family with you
Yeah.
and that you're betting on yourself and it kind of has to work out. Like
Yeah.
I think the fact that it kind of has to work out often really has helped me to take the action that I need to take. Like
Yeah.
I'm kind of grateful for it actually, for
Yeah.
being the breadwinner in my family. And that has given me it's given me a fire that I don't know if I would have had in the same way.
Yeah, I don't know that I would have been as like I will even say, so when one of the times I was already in private practice, I had a infant, probably maybe still breastfeeding a little bit, but probably towards the
Hmm.
end, maybe like two, or say infant, like two-ish, somewhere around there. And we just bought a house. Um, not a super expensive house, but like just bought a house and just done a little bit of like super old, like God bless it kind of house. My grandfather walked in and was like, this needs a lot of work. That was
Yeah.
his comment on like
Yeah.
the house purchase. Thanks, Grandpa. And had just invested like bought the house and then used the little bit of savings to like take care of the floors that were like coming up in sheets and what have you. And I was like, okay, now we need to like reclaim savings. And then my husband lost his job. And I remember I went and started interviewing places. Like, okay, I need to like go and get I need benefits. We got to like figure this thing out. And then I went through, I got a job offer, and then I sat down and I like just was like still, and I did the math and I was like, what am I doing? Like the
Yeah.
best way for me to take care of my family is not to go and get a job that's 32 hours a week on top of my practice. Like the best thing I could do for my family is raise my fee and see a few more clients like in this interim and like figure it out and ask for more support from my partner in terms of like what's happening with our kid. And, like I need to really be super intentional. And it was an interesting time. I think there is a lot of pressure for therapists in general to charge a fee as if they don't have bills or as if they have a second income, even if they don't. And I think especially for women, there is like this expectation and this secret shame if you have a partner that's not bringing in an income, that like somehow you're supposed to like magically ignore that fact and like figure it out. And it was like, no, I can't. Like, I'm not gonna do that. I'm not going to put our family into debt because other people are uncomfortable with the fee that I'm charging. Like, and it wasn't a horrible fee, but I remember like getting a lot of pushback.
Absolutely.
Then, being relatively newly licensed and out there doing the work and,
Yeah, that's a really good point that there's this kind of unspoken idea that there's somebody else supporting you and that's part of why some people can charge a lower fee. And that's kind of a hidden part of it. But yeah, if you're supporting a family, if you live in a place where you need to make more money to take care of yourself, take care of your family when people get sick, to just have a life that actually works for you.
Yeah. I still find it so incredibly fascinating. And I watch this all the time with our clients, because you probably do this a lot where you have them do the math, right? In their business. And we have this Excel spreadsheet where they answer all of these questions and is very, very in depth. And it just, at the end of it, it tells them like, here's what your fee needs to be. Like, this is how much money you need to bring in per week. This is what your fee needs to be. And they're like, but my supervisor charged this. But the person down the street that's a psychologist charges that. I'm like, but this is your math. Like, I know, like, this is just math. It's just a resource. Like, we're not talking about I don't know what their math is. I don't know if their house is paid off. I don't know if they have a trust fund. I don't know what's happening with their spouse, but I do know your math, which you did the work on.
Yes. I love this thing that Tiffany McLean has said about, so if you're undercharging, like if you're setting up your business in a way that you're not meeting your needs, like you're not paying your bills, or you're not able to take care of yourself, if let's say you do need to take some time off, if that's present, it's present in the room. Like that fact and that reality is there in the room as well. And that is impacting things. So I love that idea of facing the fact and facing the math in a really just like open-hearted, honest way. and
Yeah.
looking at, yeah, you get to absolutely make the decision and like have some intimacy with your money so that you're
Yeah.
making the decision based on your reality.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the piece, is that like, in a sense, I would even go beyond what Tiffany's saying in terms of like,
Yeah.
it's there in the room and saying like, then your fee's a lie. Your fee is
Mm.
dishonest,
Yeah.
right? Like your fee is a lie. If you are not taken care of, if you are still struggling to, like, you have a full practice that is your
Mhm.
full primary income, and you're still in like income-based repayment, and you can't pay down your student loans at like a basic
Mhm.
level, like something is off with that math,
Yeah.
And I think we need to really start to be honest as a profession about what it takes to do this work. And it's not something where we get paid, $100 or $200 an hour, because
Yeah.
we're not getting paid for the time that we're in front of people. We're getting paid for all the time that came before that moment, all the time
Mhm.
that comes out of that session. And that includes your website or paying someone to manage it, your bookkeeping or paying someone to do the bookkeeping. Like, no matter how you, like, people are like, well, I'll just do it myself. I'm like, cool. Then you have less time for therapy and we
Mhm.
need to do that. Okay, I'll just pay someone else. Cool. Then you have more expenses.
Yeah.
like it doesn't matter where
Yeah.
you put it in. Like there's just a cost to running business, and we have to be honest about that cost. And our clients need us to be fully present. They need us to not come in tomorrow and say, hey, I'm done. And honestly, I think that lie of the fee, I think it really contributes to burnout and unprofessionalism in our profession, like
Yeah.
in major ways. I don't think people mean to fall asleep in session. I don't think
Mm.
people mean to, get snarly or squirrely with their clients or other people or forget what they're saying. But these are the things that happen. I have a
Yeah.
friend whose child is actually still seeing this therapist, and this therapist has done things like show up to a Zoom session with their shirt off.
Oh no.
um,
Oh no.
have a family member in the car while they were on speakerphone during a therapy session on a trip,
Oh boy.
listening to the therapy session, like these kinds of things. Like these are the therapists that are out there in the world, kind of like acting as if this is okay. And clients don't necessarily know that, right?
Mhm.
But like we know that. And if we don't, I think if we start to lie to ourselves about what
Mhm.
it takes and what's needed, I think those lies start to erode our soul. I think they start to erode our professionalism. And then you end up with really weird things
And
happening
you
in the
get these
therapy
horror
room.
stories.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. It also feels like, so you and I both have in our stories that we really, I guess I want to use the word optimized. Like we both really optimized our practices
Yeah.
before letting them go.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really important part of this because I think there's a fantasy when people start working with me. Some of them have a fantasy of, I'm going to solve this by jumping into something different. Like I'm going to solve this
Mhm.
by creating a program beyond private practice. And I'm like, yes, I freaking love helping people do that. And if you optimize your therapy practice either before or at the same time,
Yeah.
like that will set you up to do this in the right way, to figure out if it's even right for you,
Yeah.
and then to do it in the right way. But if you jump into the next thing, whether it's like a program beyond private practice or whether it's like switching careers, whatever
Yeah.
it is that you,
Consulting or business coaching.
mm-hmm,
That's one
any
of
of it.
mine. I love it. People are like, I don't really like being in private practice. I'm not making good profits, so I'm going to become a business coach. And I'm like, girl,
No, like, no, you got to optimize that.
heal thyself first.
Yes, we will totally recreate whatever it is that is horrible for us. Like,
Yes.
I absolutely could have done that. Like, I absolutely find myself in moments where I'm like, wait a minute, what are you doing? Like, what boundary are you choosing to set or not set here? Because there is no like magic kind of business that will take care of all of that for you. Like,
No.
you have to decide and like set those boundaries, decide what you want your life to look like, and then actually do it that way.
Yeah.
And so I feel like, yeah, healing the business you're in now is worth it,
Yeah.
even if you're going to get the hell out of there, like within
Yeah.
6 months. Like, work on healing it like today,
Yeah.
figure out your fees, figure out your boundaries, figure out your niche. And like,
Yeah.
that will only help you create the next thing.
Yeah. I think it's really almost like if people can conceptualize this, that you're literally like in a miserable marriage.
Yes. Yes.
And you're like out there, you're like, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to start dating. I'm not going to tell my spouse. There's not going to be any conversation or communication about that.
Yeah.
I'm just going to go over and I'm going to put all my energy into finding the love of my life.
Yes.
And as soon as I find that person, I'll just go ahead and then this will magically sort itself out.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just absolutely not how it works. If you don't have awareness of how you got to where you are in your relationship, how to close it with intention, how to do this in a healthy way, like having those hard conversations, this new relationship, this new person isn't going to be magic.
That's right.
There's no magic outlet. And I think right now in particular, we're talking about those issues of, and it's always interesting to talk about, especially as a trauma therapist. But I think a lot of the things that we're seeing with therapists right now, kind of like mirror like a trauma response cycle.
Mm-hmm.
And one of those ways that we respond to a trauma is to run. And I think there's a lot of people right now who are like flighting. They're kind of like running into, I need a passive income screen. I need to become a this. I need to become a that. I need to go and do something different without really looking at like, well, is this your intuition? Like really telling you it's time and like, let's explore it. And then there's no panic about that. Or is this really like you're feeling unsafe? You're feeling fearful. Your amygdala is just fired up. And we need to settle that response and get into the here and now and make sure that your here and now is really safe. And then let's go ahead and create a plan. If like your intuition's like, yeah, that's where I'm supposed to go. Like, yeah, let's do it. But let's not do it in a panic. Let's not do it because we're responding to a global systemic, a global trauma that we've been co-experiencing with our clients for the last, 18 to 24 months.
Absolutely. Yeah. And if like, I think there's a lot of clues, but one clue that it's really time to rest is if you keep finding yourself drawn to the idea of passive income. Like, I think that's one clue that you may not at the moment have the passion to create like a business beyond private practice, because the passive, if it ever comes, which for me, that's not ever my business plan, actually.
No.
Like, I really love working with people and being in it with them. But if passive is your goal, like that is not soon. And so passive, that word passive might mean it's time to rest. Like, it's really time to find rest, find a way to take a sabbatical, find a way to add some rest into every day, like find some kind of rest, and then see if you've got the juice and the passion to actually create something.
Yeah. And I would go, I would go even farther and saying the idea of passive income, but also if what you want to do changes from hour to hour and day to day, that kind of place, I think I'm going to do this. I think I'm going to do that. I think I'm going to do this. And every story that, every blog, you're listening to a lot of content, you're bringing all this stuff in, and it's just, that's where your whole mind is. I think that, again, it's this place we're going to be at this point, actually, when this airs, I think our training will have come out, but we're kind of diving into that in an impactful way. I'm really excited about it. with this burnt therapist training, but we need to heal, as individuals and as a collective. And yes, there's going to be some amazing programs and shifts and life changes that's going to come out of that healing, but you cannot skip the healing part. You cannot skip the safety part and think that any business or man or woman or person or thing is going to save you, like we have to like sit and settle into that. And the best, I often joke with people too, with therapists, I'll say like, hey, how about this? I can give you a passive income stream. It will cost you it'll take you no more than an hour to put together. It will take maybe like another hour or two over a 2-week period. And you'll have no additional expenses whatsoever, right? And you'll make $10,000 of like pure profit. Like, how does that sound? And they're like, that sounds amazing. And I'm like, cool. Stop sliding your fee. If you have 20 clients a week that are coming about 50 weeks a year, and if on average, if you say your fee is 150, but on average, you're only bringing in 140, that's $10,000 in profit. If you say your fee is 150, but your average is actually 120 because of insurance, that's $30,000 of profit, right? No additional expenses. So I think that's the other part too, that's so interesting, is there's also this passive income and the discomfort with talking about money and talking about their fee and making changes of what they really need in their life.
Yeah.
It's often this fear of saying like, well, what really needs to happen is that like, I need support from my business. And I'm not asking it. I'm not even giving it an opportunity to support me in the way that I need it. It is a relationship. And I need to say, hey, you know what? I do need like another $10,000 of profit from you. And I need it like right away. And the business says, well, cool, but like, you're not charging what you said you're going to charge. And like, what are you doing? And then you signed up for another $10,000 program over here on top of that. So now I'm getting to like help us escape, and create this passive income stream, when like we could have done that with a few hours and a few difficult conversations. We could be on the other side of it. Oh my gosh.
Something
to you, Annie.
I love it. Something you've mentioned a couple of times that I want to really hold on to is like this idea of being willing to be uncomfortable. And like, I've been thinking a lot about that as entrepreneurs and as healers. I think we need to be willing to be uncomfortable, and then also to know what is discomfort that's growthful and what's discomfort that's just telling us like, get the hell out of this. This is not right for you. This is not aligned. And they're different. And I think we are in a great position as healers to know that difference, but we need to like pay attention to it. Like, I have done things that I was uncomfortable with because they were wrong for me. They were not aligned with my values. And then I do things all the freaking time that make me uncomfortable in like the best way. So, and like, I mess it up sometimes, but like, that's for me, like, that's a conversation that I need to be in with myself constantly. And I keep hearing you mention like, that, like, what kind of a should is it? Like, is it coming from your spirit or from your ancestors, or is it coming from like capitalism? Like, where's the should coming from? That really matters.
It really does. And I think this is one of the reasons why, oops, I'm so sorry. This is one of the reasons why I really like the whole, like, what we do in one thing is what we do in everything. And I think a lot of therapists do not, like, we all need more hobbies. We need things outside of the therapy room that allow us to get to know ourselves and how we feel in different situations, so that we can like explore that and notice where it comes up. So for example, like climbing for me. I have a fear of heights, or acro yoga, like to know the difference between, oh, I can see that this is safe rationally. And I can feel that this is bringing up my issues of allowing other people to like to support me. And it's hard for me to trust people, but I can see that this person is trustworthy. So let me practice leaning into that discomfort of allowing myself with trustworthy people to be like literally physically supported.
Yeah.
And how might that help me in other areas of my life to allow, right? To figure out who I can trust versus, and also with acro yoga, right? When you balance on other people, there are people where I'm like, oh, that's not someone that I would trust to support me. That doesn't feel safe for me. And can I communicate that with someone? You know, like I was doing something where I was supporting someone, I was holding them up in the air. They were upside down. And then when it started, I said, oh, down. And they didn't like kind of like listen. And then they decided to kind of bail in a way that I felt really uncomfortable with. And they were fine. They were like, oh no, I knew it was safe. And I'm like, but I need to communicate to you. That felt really unsafe for me. But that has been like work to say, like, I really like playing with you. This is really fun. For me, it feels real uncomfortable. And I don't, can we talk about how we can bail in the future when something's not working? Right. But those skills that I practice in this silly, playful environment, do they come up in my business? Absolutely. Do they come up with my clients in my personal, my romantic relationship? Absolutely. I think we need to have some more time and space, but I think most therapists have no time and space to like be still, to play on someone else, or get on their uke and like take a class, or start working on a really hard song, and to know like, is this song like outside of my scope right now, and I need to like work on something else and come back to it? Or like, do I just need to like stick it out and like be uncomfortable with it? Like, is this something that I need to bring out into the world and, bring out the ukulele on the podcast with Kelly Miranda and play everyone a song, like, or like, oh no, like that doesn't feel good, right? Like whatever that is, like these are the places that we have to like have some room and space. And I think, especially with the demand right now for therapy, I think a lot of people feel an obligation to do just as much as they possibly can. And most people have less reserves than they did before. So we should actually be seeing fewer clients right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, not more.
Yeah. You got to like look at the long term, look at preserving yourself. Yeah. And if you throw yourself under the bus, you're not going to be there. You're going to be that therapist with their shirt off that Miranda was talking about earlier. Right. Like, you don't want to be that person.
Oh, please don't be that person. Please don't. Well, I know that we are at the end of our hour. I don't even know how long we've been talking. It's been a while. I love it.
I love it.
Check out rebeltherapist.me, right? Or the rebeltherapist.me.
No, you got it. Rebeltherapist.me. Yes.
Rebeltherapist.me. Check out Annie. Get on her list. She's magical. Can you didn't you feel that? Don't you? Yes.
Thank you so much. Yeah. And this is an opportunity to look at creating a signature program beyond private practice that is not built on BS, and it's not promising you passive income in the next 6 months. It's going to be based on the truth.
Yeah. And the truth is?
The truth is you need to start small and run experiments and start serving at the highest level, just like you would in your therapy practice, and learn as you go and create something sustainable.
Yeah.
That's some of the truth.
Yeah. And as Annie said earlier, some of the truth is also work on your main business before or during.
That's right.
This isn't a magic wand or escape to let you, quit this. I think sometimes that's even, oh, see, I'm just going to get sidetracked, but like that, like even like private practice sometimes is like, oh, this agency is burnout and this is so terrible. And then we don't really look at how we were kind of complicit or what we learned about that. And then we replicate what we learned in the agency in our private practice. And then we're like, oh my God, private practice is terrible too. Let me go over here to this like program, online course, because I could do that from anywhere. Meaning now you're on your phone 24/7. You have even less like whatever, and then like we're replicating the path. And then finally we go, wait, let me do some
I keep
work.
being the one who's here. So there must be something about what I'm doing. Yeah.
Yeah. Or just, something that I need to learn and lean into. And that's okay. Like we're all learning. I'm still learning. I've been doing this for a long time, like I used to be the young person in the coaching place. And now I'm the person with all the gray hair, like when did that
I'm going to be
happen?
50 exactly 1 month from today. So
How are you going to celebrate, Annie?
I'm going away with a few of my really close friends in January. But really just some like internal quiet time to reflect is the thing I'm craving the most.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Yeah. I just celebrated my birthday. I'm not quite to 50 yet, but it's coming down the pike. And I actually had like a party.
Nice.
Yeah, which I don't normally do. I don't generally celebrate my birthday, but I was like, you know what? What do I like? I want to dance. Like I want to like be silly and like have a great time. And so I was able to do it safely. So I'm really excited about that. So
That's awesome.
Anywho, until next time, again, rebeltherapist.me. Check out Annie. She's lovely. And of course, zinnyme.com/free. We got all the resources, podcast notes. You can check all that out over there as well. Until next time, just know that you really can have a life and a practice that brings you joy and healing. You deserve that. You're worthy of that today. You don't have to wait for it. And if you need some support and skills and strategies on how to actually make that happen, there's lots of resources out there for you. So just go out there and get what you need because we need more therapists like you, not less.